10,000 years ago, Lyra stood beneath a sky that seemed to stretch into eternity. Her wild, untamed beauty reflected the untamed world around her. Her blonde hair blew in the fierce wind. Her beautiful striking blue eyes and her skinny muscles, skinny but strong with great body strength overall, honed from years of surviving the harsh elements, were like steel, giving her a wild strength unmatched even by the men in her tribe. But her heart belonged to one man, Kale. Kale was brave, his touch soft in a world that was anything but. On the fateful day it all changed. They were hunting when a rogue elephant charged. Kale, without hesitation, pushed Lyra out of harm's way. He saved her life, only to be trampled beneath the massive beast's feet. Lyra could only scream as she fell backward into the freezing depths of the ice, Kale's face the last thing she saw as the cold engulfed her. Thousands of years passed in silence beneath the ice until one day, in modern times, Lyra was discovered by scientists. Perfectly preserved, her body was thawed and against all expectations she lived. A woman from another world brought back to life. Her beauty was still striking, her muscles still formidable, and despite her confusion, she quickly proved stronger than even the strongest men around her. The world marveled at her existence, but Lyra's heart was still back in the past with Kale. She couldn't forget him, the man who had sacrificed himself for her, who had been her everything. Now she was alone in a world she didn't understand, her grief gnawing at her as she struggled to adapt. One night, while learning about this strange new world through a flickering screen, something caught her eye. There, on the TV, was a man who looked just like Kale. He was a movie star, charismatic but clearly down on his luck. The brightness of his career had faded, and he was desperate for any opportunity to stay relevant. His name was Ethan, and when he learned about Lyra, he saw his chance. He agreed to meet her, hoping to use her for publicity. But when they met face to face, something unexpected happened. Lyra's gaze, filled with ancient grief and raw emotion, stirred something in him. She was unlike anyone he'd ever met, and though he began the relationship for selfish reasons, he slowly found himself drawn to her sincerity, her strength, and the way she looked at him as if he were the center of her world. As time went on, Lyra began to learn the language. Her primitive understanding of this new life deepened, and with it came a growing realization. Something wasn't right. Ethan was kind to her, but she sensed an unease. Was he using her just like the rest of this world that had put her on display? One evening, after weeks of learning, she confronted him. Her voice, though halting, was filled with the weight of her question. "Do you love me?" she asked, her eyes locking onto his. "For me." Ethan froze, his face betraying the guilt he had tried to suppress. He had used her and he knew it. At first it had been a game, a ploy to climb back into the spotlight. But now, standing before her, seeing the depth of her pain, he felt ashamed. He looked at her, at the woman who had survived for so long, who had loved so deeply, and he couldn't hide the truth any longer. I didn't at first," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But now I don't know what's real anymore. You've changed everything." Lyra's face hardened as she absorbed his words. She had been through too much, lost too much to be toyed with again. But she also saw the honesty in his eyes, the way his facade had cracked. He was no Kale, but maybe, just maybe, there was something real between them. "I stay. Or I go," she said simply, the choice hanging in the air between them. Ethan took a deep breath. "I want you to stay. Not because of the cameras or the fame. Just stay because I've fallen for you." Lyra studied him, her heart still aching for the man she had lost, but a new hope began to form. She knew she would never forget Kale, but maybe it was time to start living in this world, not the one she had left behind. And so, with a tentative nod, she decided to stay. The ancient wound in her heart still throbbed, but in Ethan's arms, She found a warmth she hadn't felt in thousands of years. The love she thought had been lost forever might still have a place, even in this new strange world.